A crack of contempt echoes through the courtroom when Officer Reynolds shoves the quiet black woman in the witness stand. His smirk says it all. Just another day, intimidating someone he considers beneath him. What he doesn't realize, she's not a witness. She's Federal Agent Zora Pierce, leading the investigation into police corruption. And in the next 5 minutes, the career he built on fear and prejudice starts to collapse. This is a story of arrogance, systemic abuse, and the kind of justice that doesn't whisper. It roars. Stick around. The twist? You won't believe it until you see it. Let us know where you're watching from and what time you found this. We read every single comment. Atlanta, Georgia, carried the weight of its contradictions like a familiar burden. Gleaming skyscrapers and historic neighborhoods existing in an uneasy truce, progress, and tradition locked in perpetual negotiation. The morning sun filtered through high windows of the Fulton County Courthouse as Agent Zora Pierce moved through security with practiced ease. At 45, Zora carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every step. Her dark brown hair framed intense eyes that missed nothing, especially not the subtle dismissals and microaggressions that followed her through spaces like this. The security guards nodded respectfully. Some recognized her from previous visits. Many mistook her unassuming presence for weakness. This federal courthouse, with its imposing columns and marble floors, had witnessed centuries of both justice and its painful absence. Zora had walked these halls for 15 years, first as a prosecutor determined to protect the vulnerable, then as an FBI agent specializing in civil rights violations and police corruption. Her recent promotion to lead the Southeast Division's Police Accountability Task Force had made her both respected and resented in equal measure. She was the first black woman to hold the position, and she knew exactly what that meant. Every move scrutinized, every decision questioned. Zora understood the weight of breaking barriers. They didn't just throw obstacles in your path. They pretended you weren't there at all. As she passed through the rotunda toward courtroom 3, her mind was already focused on today's hearing. Ipurdihi was supposed to be routine. Evidence submission in a case involving allegations of excessive force. But something felt off. Her instincts, honed through years of interrogations and investigations, were quietly signaling caution. The clerk outside the courtroom greeted her with visible tension. "Good morning, Agent Pierce. Officer Reynolds is already inside." Zora paused. Reynolds. She knew the name all too well. Detective Marcus Reynolds, Atlanta PD, Narcotics Division. 15 years on the force, decorated multiple times, but with a personnel file that painted a different picture. Complaints of racial profiling, excessive force, and intimidation tactics, all mysteriously disappeared or reduced to administrative slaps on the wrist. Reynolds was Atlanta law enforcement royalty, third-generation cop, connected to everyone from the commissioner down. He carried his badge like a license rather than a responsibility. The kind of officer who confused fear with respect and mistook silence for consent. Zora had been tracking his patterns for months as part of a broader corruption investigation. Today's hearing involved a young black man Reynolds had arrested during a neighborhood sweep. Jamal Carter, college student, no priors, charged with drug possession despite inconsistencies in the evidence reports. She entered the courtroom quietly, not yet announcing her official capacity. Reynolds was already there, standing by the prosecution table, expression smug as he stared down the nervous young defendant and his overwhelmed public defender. Reynolds didn't even glance at Zora as she entered. Another black woman invisible, to him in a system he considered his domain. "Let's get this moving," Reynolds barked toward the clerk. "Some of us have real work waiting." Tell the judge to hurry it up." "The court proceeds on its own schedule," Zora said evenly. Reynolds, finally, turned and stared. There was a split-second pause where confusion flashed across his face. He was trying to place her. Lawyer, clerk, reporter maybe. She wasn't in uniform, wasn't seated in authority, so to him she wasn't important. "You with the defense?" said smugly. Zora didn't answer. She moved toward the side table to review a file left there. The room was mostly empty. Just a few early-arriving journalists, a handful of attorneys preparing for later cases, and 2 uniformed officers at the back wall. Reynolds, now clearly irritated by being ignored, stormed over toward her. "Hey, I'm talking to you," I said. And then it happened. A sharp, open-handed slap cracked through the air as Reynolds struck Zora's shoulder to get her attention. The sound echoed off the wooden panels. Even the fluorescent lights above seemed to flicker in response. Zora didn't move. She didn't flinch or gasp or step back. Slowly, she turned her head, locking eyes with the man who had just laid hands on her. Reynolds stepped back, almost surprised by his own action, but not ashamed. He stood taller, shoulders squaring, chin lifting slightly. "You people need to learn some respect," he muttered. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Another voice, "Is she okay?" But Zora's gaze never left Reynolds. Her stillness was unnerving, like a predator assessing prey, though Reynolds remained oblivious to the trap he just sprung for himself. "I don't care who you think you are," he continued, voice rising. "You don't ignore a detective when he's speaking to you." Zora stepped forward just once, then again. The silence tightened like a rope. The clerk whispered to someone nearby, She's not just a witness." But Reynolds wasn't listening. His face had flushed red, the vein at his temple visible. And then Zora spoke, calmly and with precision. "Is this how you treat federal officers, detective?" The color drained from one officer's face near the back. A lawyer dropped their pen. Reynolds blinked. "What are you talking about?" Zora stepped onto the prosecution side of the gallery. Nobody breathed. Detective Reynolds stood like a statue, eyes locked on FBI agent Zora Pierce as she pulled back her jacket to reveal her badge. He blinked twice. For the first time in years, he was afraid. Zora clasped her hands in front of her. She let the silence weigh down. Even the bailiff, Officer Wilson, looked like he was holding his breath. One moment can change everything. What would you do if the room turned against you without warning? Share your reaction below. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. "Detective Reynolds," Zora finally said, her voice carrying through the now silent room, "did you just physically assault a federal agent in this courtroom?" I didn't know who you were," he muttered. "That is not what I asked. Yes or no?" Someone near the gallery entrance had already pulled out their phone. Cameras were rolling. "You came at me," Reynolds said, voice defensive. You thought I was beneath you," Zora said, each word precise. "You thought I was someone you could intimidate or dismiss." "You're twisting this into something it's not." "I'm not twisting anything," Zora replied. "You assaulted a woman unprovoked in a federal courthouse. That's a felony." He glanced at the other officers in the room. No one met his eye. "If I were a white male agent, would you have put your hands on me, Detective Reynolds?" Reynolds said nothing. His silence was the loudest admission in the room. "I'll take that as a no," Zora continued. "Now you've compounded that assault with defiance." "I was doing my job," Reynolds snapped. "That kid—" He pointed toward the defendant, Jamal Carter, a thin, nervous teenager who straightened slightly at the sudden attention. "Enough," Zora cut him off. "You do not get to justify assault by deflecting to your case, which is itself built on questionable evidence. If someone crossed a line they couldn't take back, would you call them out? Or let the world decide? Drop your answer in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too." She turned to the clerk, her tone crisp. "Ms. Daniels, please enter into the record that Detective Marcus Reynolds has physically assaulted a federal officer investigating police corruption within the Atlanta PD." Reynolds took a step back, finally, understanding that the air around him was shifting fast. This wasn't going to be swept under the rug like before. No union rep was going to pop in and make it disappear. Not this time. Zora glanced at the bailiff. "Officer Wilson, is this courtroom currently under video surveillance?" "Yes, ma'am," he replied immediately, his voice taut. "Good. Then the record will also reflect visual evidence." Reynolds's eyes flicked toward the corners of the ceiling, where two small red recording lights blinked silently back at him. That was when his expression truly changed. He wasn't just angry anymore. He was scared. "I didn't mean—" he began again. But Zora raised a single hand and stopped him cold. "You've had 12 years of not meaning it," she said. "I've read your file. I've seen the complaints. I've seen how they disappeared. But here's what's different today, Detective. This happened in front of witnesses, under cameras, to a federal agent who's been investigating you for months." He opened his mouth again, but she didn't let him continue. "I have spent my life watching men like you mistake force for law, mistake fear for respect, and mistake silence for consent. Not today." She stood straighter, the whole room rising with her tension. "In accordance with the authority vested in me as Special Agent in charge of the FBI's Southeast Civil Rights Division, when the tide starts turning, do you stand firmer or back down? What would you do if power shifted your way? Let us know. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. I am officially placing you under investigation for civil rights violations, witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and now assault on a federal officer." The gasp from the back of the room was audible. Zora turned to the bailiff. "Officer Wilson, please detain Detective Reynolds temporarily. Do not apply cuffs yet. He is still a sworn officer, and I expect professionalism. But he is not to leave this room." Reynolds's mouth dropped open. "You can't be serious," he cried, chest rising with disbelief. "I didn't even know who you—" "And yet," Zora said quietly, her eyes unblinking, "you knew enough to hit me." Reynolds looked around wildly, but no one stepped forward. No allies, no defense. Just the slow tightening of the noose he'd tied for himself. The sound of the courtroom door shutting behind the clerk echoed like a warning shot through the room. Officer Wilson stood near Reynolds, hand resting lightly on his belt. Not threatening, but clearly ready. Reynolds stood rigid, face flushed red, jaw tight, and fists clenched at his sides like he was holding back a storm of rage. Zora remained standing by the prosecution table, her gaze pinned to him like a steel rod. She didn't blink, didn't soften. She gave him no escape hatch, no space to pivot into denial. "Agent Pierce," came a voice from the gallery. It was the assistant district attorney assigned to the drug possession case, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair, and suddenly, very pale features. "Do you want to proceed with today's hearing?" Zora turned her gaze slowly toward him. "I will decide that momentarily. But first, I want to address everyone in this room, because what just happened is no longer a matter of courtroom decorum. It is a matter of law, precedent, and public trust. She looked toward the journalists. "You all witnessed an on-duty detective physically assault a federal agent in a courthouse. You heard his words. You saw his posture. I want you to record that. I want you to remember it. Because if the law can't protect those who enforce it fairly, then we are no longer in a democracy. We are in something much darker." The room was dead silent. Even the click of keyboards had stopped. Reynolds scoffed suddenly, unable to help himself. "Are you really going to turn this into a damn press moment?" Zora slowly turned back to him. "Is that what you think this is, detective? Public accountability, a moment of theater?" He said nothing. She stepped closer, heels striking like a clock counting down. "You've been protected for a long time, haven't you?" she said softly, so that only those close could hear. But the microphone still caught every word. "I've seen officers like you before. The kind who walks into a room already assuming everyone in it is beneath them. The kind who says, 'I didn't know,' when they mean, 'I didn't care.'" Reynolds's eyes flicked nervously toward Wilson, but the bailiff didn't move. "Let me tell you what's about to happen," Zora continued. "Internal Affairs is being notified. I will personally be submitting my ongoing case file to the Justice Department before the end of day. The footage of this incident will be sealed for legal review, but the press in this room, they already have enough to make it headline news before lunch." Reynolds's mouth opened. "You're destroying my career over a misunderstanding." "No, detective," Zora said. "You destroyed your career the moment your hand struck my shoulder." There it was, sharp and final. He shifted on his feet, glancing again at the young man he'd arrested. Jamal was watching him now, not in fear, not anymore, but in something Reynolds couldn't quite recognize. Pity. The same look he'd seen in mugshots of men he'd arrested, right before the cuffs went on. "I've served this city for 12 years, Reynolds said, louder now, almost pleading. "I've risked my life in these streets. I've taken down real criminals. And now you're going to throw me to the wolves because I made a mistake in a tense moment." Zora turned, walking back toward her briefcase. "I'm not throwing you to the wolves, detective," she said, as she retrieved a folder. "I'm handing you to the law you've spent years hiding behind. Today, that badge doesn't shield you. It holds you accountable." She sat down at the prosecution table, her posture straight as armor. She tapped her files once, then addressed the room. "This hearing is not concluded," she said, "but the case against Mr. Carter is being reassessed in light of new information. The arresting officer has compromised the integrity of this case." The public defender for Jamal stood, adjusting his tie nervously. "Thank you, Agent Pierce." Zora nodded. "Take your client out through the side exit. My colleague will escort him safely." Jamal stood, glancing back once at Reynolds as he walked out. His face was unreadable, but something in his posture had changed. Less curled, less apologetic. Reynolds, meanwhile, had gone quiet. His eyes no longer burned. They darted. He was thinking, calculating, waiting. Zora watched him like one might study a dangerous animal that just realized it had been caged. Then she turned to the bailiff. "Officer Wilson, please escort Detective Reynolds to interview Room C. My team will be arriving shortly. This matter is no longer internal. It is criminal." Reynolds didn't resist, but his jaw was locked so tightly you could hear the muscles grind as Wilson gently tapped his elbow, guiding him toward the side exit. Reynolds said, just loud enough for Zora to hear, "You think you've won, don't you?" Zora didn't look at him. She just whispered, "I think for once the right person is losing." "What would you do if the whole room watched you bring someone to justice? Stay strong or show mercy? Let's talk about it." hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. Agent Pierce, Officer Wilson said cautiously, holding out the courtroom phone. The commissioner is on the line. He's asking if you'd be willing to de-escalate. Handle this administratively. Off record. Zora didn't take the phone. She stared at it like it was a weapon, silent but heavy. Tell the commissioner I don't serve politics. I serve justice. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Wilson nodded. Yes, ma'am, he said, placing the phone back on the receiver without another word. Someone in the gallery murmured, She just told the Commissioner no. Another whispered, About time. The power in the room shifted again, but this time it didn't roar. It hummed. Zora closed her eyes briefly, just long enough to feel how tired she was. When she opened them again, they were clear, focused, unshakable. Somewhere deep down, she knew this would cost her. In relationships, in cooperation, maybe in promotions yet to come. But she also knew the cost of silence, and she wasn't paying it anymore. Zora picked up her secure phone, something she'd only used for major case breakthroughs. She dialed directly to the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. This is Special Agent Zora Pierce. I am formally requesting expansion of our current investigation to include obstruction and cover-up by department leadership. She paused, then added, Send the full team. This just broke wide open. Officer Wilson straightened. One of the younger clerks gasped. Even the assistant DA slowly removed his glasses. No one spoke. They just watched history unfold in real time. Reynolds, still flanked by a second officer who had arrived, let out a bitter, breathless laugh. You're serious. You're actually going to tear down the whole department to make a point. Not tear down, Zora replied, lowering the receiver. Build up. She stood slowly. For the first time in a long time. Outside, sirens began to rise. In the distance. Not urgent, not chaotic. Just steady, on schedule. 2 federal agents in dark suits entered the courtroom, their badges visible, their presence unmistakable. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. Zora stepped away from the prosecution table for the last time that day, closed her briefcase, and handed over the file herself. The investigation expands now, she said, giving it to the lead agent. And it doesn't stop with him. Reynolds was led out without resistance, his badge and gun surrendered in silence, his name no longer a shield. The courtroom stayed quiet, long after they were gone. Not stunned anymore. Sobered. Zora turned one last time to the remaining gallery. This is what accountability looks like, she said. And we're just beginning. Then she walked out, not with noise, but with purpose. The camera held on the empty courtroom, the files still resting on the wooden table. A symbol. Not of power, but of someone who chose to stand when it mattered. This wasn't about one detective, one courthouse, one act of disrespect. This was about what happens when silence breaks and someone finally says, enough. Real justice doesn't shout. It doesn't seek the spotlight. It holds the line when no one else will. Like Agent Pierce, we don't need to scream to be heard, but when we do speak, let it echo. Because justice doesn't begin in courtrooms. It begins in people.